If your living room smelled like shag carpet and melted plastic, and your mom's favorite chair squeaked with vinyl, welcome home. The 1970s weren't just a decade, they were a vibe. Strange, warm, avocado-colored chaos.
Polaroid's got a new SX70 film that develops twice as fast now and gives you their most brilliant colors ever. What's that one?
Today, we're counting down 30 strange gadgets from the 1970s that you won't find in stores today. Some were brilliant, most were weird, all of them shaped who you became. And if even one triggers a memory you forgot you had, the sound, the smell, the feeling, you're about to remember what made the 70s unapologetically unforgettable. Let's dive in. Before cell phones, before texting, before the internet, there was the CB radio, and for a brief, glorious moment in the mid-1970s, it was everywhere. Citizens Band radio turned your car into a communication hub. Truckers warned about speed traps. Families chatted between vehicles on road trips, and suburban dads felt like they were part of something bigger than their daily commute. You'd see the antenna, long, whip-like, sometimes drilled right through the roof of a Buick. It marked you as someone in the know, someone connected to the hidden conversations happening on the highway. Every CB user had a handle. Your dad probably had one, something he thought sounded cool but that your mom rolled her eyes at. And when he keyed that mic and said, "Breaker, breaker 19," he wasn't just talking, he was performing. Photography in the 1970s required patience. You took a picture, drove to the drugstore, waited 3 days, and hoped half the photos turned out okay. Then Polaroid said, "What if you could see your picture in 60 seconds?" The Polaroid instant camera was magic wrapped in plastic and chemistry. You'd press the shutter, hear the whir, and watch the camera spit out a small square. Then came the ritual, shaking it, waving it in the air, watching colors slowly bleed into the white square, revealing moments that happened less than a minute ago. It felt like science fiction. In a world where technology required waiting, Polaroid gave you instant gratification. The Atari 2600 didn't just change gaming, it changed childhood. Before 1977, video games lived in arcades, gobbling quarters. Then Atari brought them home, and suddenly your TV wasn't just for watching, it was for playing. The console was beautiful in a 1970s way. Wood paneling, angular design, switches that clicked with authority. This wasn't a toy. This was technology. Serious, future-forward living room technology. The cartridges were chunky black rectangles you shoved into the slot with just the right amount of force. Each had artwork that promised way more than the game delivered. Space battles looked epic on the box. On screen, they were colored squares that beeped. But none of that mattered, because when you plugged in Combat or Space Invaders or Pitfall, you weren't playing a game, you were inside it. Walk into a 1970s home, and your feet sank 3 inches before touching solid ground. Shag carpeting wasn't flooring, it was an ecosystem, thick, wild, impossible to clean. It came in colors that shouldn't exist. Avocado green, burnt orange, harvest gold, rust brown. This wasn't practical carpet. This was shag. Fibers so long they moved when you walked through them, creating trails like footprints in snow. Kids would lie face down watching Saturday morning cartoons, and when they stood up, their cheeks were marked with fiber imprints. Every house had shag somewhere. Living rooms, bedrooms, hallways, even bathrooms, which was an absolutely unhinged design choice. But if it could be covered in shag, it was. You could run your fingers through it like grass, dig your toes into it after kicking off your shoes. Some families used it as a play surface. Toy cars drove through shag like jungle terrain. Others vacuumed twice a week and panicked when someone spilled grape juice. There was a ceremony to making a phone call in the 1970s. You'd pick up the receiver, heavy, solid, real, and wait for the dial tone. That steady hum meant the line was open. The world was listening. Then came the dialing. Stick your finger in the hole, pull the dial clockwise until it hit the stopper, and release. The dial would spin back, clicking rhythmically. Slow, deliberate, impossible to rush. If you messed up, hit an 8 instead of a 9, you had to hang up and start over. No backspace, no delete. Just frustration and wasted time. The phone was usually mounted on the kitchen wall, cord stretching about 10 feet. That cord became the battleground for privacy. You'd stretch it into the hallway, around the corner, as far as it would go, whispering, while siblings eavesdropped from the kitchen. And that cord tangled, always. It twisted into knots that defied physics. Every few months, someone would let the receiver dangle, spinning slowly to unwind the chaos. It never fully worked. The weight of the receiver mattered. When you slammed it down in anger, it made a sound, a definitive room-shaking crash that communicated fury better than words. Hanging up on someone today, tapping a screen, has zero emotional impact. But slamming a rotary phone receiver? That was closure. That was power. We're only 5 gadgets in, and you're already seeing the pattern. Every single one was a household staple. Every single one disappeared, and every single one shaped how we live today. But here's where it gets wild. The next 5 gadgets are even stranger and even more unforgettable. Let's keep going. Furniture in the 1970s asked one question: why should chairs have rules? Beanbag chairs answered by throwing out structure entirely and replacing it with thousands of tiny pellets wrapped in vinyl. They weren't chairs, they were commitments. Sitting in a beanbag meant surrendering to gravity. You'd flop backward, and the chair would swallow you whole, molding to your body like a giant hug. Getting out? That required strategy, momentum, and usually help from a sibling who'd laugh while you struggled. They came in every color: bright orange, avocado green, sunshine yellow, fire engine red. The vinyl was sticky in summer, cold in winter. It squeaked when you moved, making sounds like deflating balloons or distant wails. Kids loved beanbags because adults hated them. Watching your dad try to stand up from a beanbag was entertainment better than TV. He'd rock forward, grunt, and finally roll sideways onto the floor before standing and pretending it was intentional. Dinner parties in the 1970s required 3 things: mood lighting, a Carpenter's album, and a fondue set. Real entertaining meant gathering around a bubbling pot of melted cheese and stabbing food with long forks like sophisticated cave people. Fondue sets came in original boxes, often received as wedding gifts, displayed proudly as proof of social status. The set included a ceramic pot, metal stand, color-coded forks, and a fuel canister that burned with a blue flame. The ceremony began with preparation. Cheese fondue required white wine, cornstarch, and whatever cheese was on sale, usually Swiss or Gruyere. The cheese would bubble gently, thick and glossy, making the whole room smell like melted glory. Everyone got a fork, red, blue, green, yellow, so you could track whose was whose. Lighting in the 1970s didn't just illuminate rooms, it hypnotized them. And nothing hypnotized quite like a lava lamp. These weren't practical. They weren't bright. They were slow-motion sculptures of colored wax floating in liquid, and we couldn't look away. The design was iconic: a glass cylinder on a metal base, filled with liquid, and a giant blob of wax. You'd plug it in, wait 20 minutes for the bulb to heat the wax, and watch as physics and chemistry performed a ballet. The blob would slowly warm, soften, break apart. Pieces would rise like alien jellyfish, stretch toward the top, cool, and sink back down. Sometimes they'd merge mid-float. Sometimes they'd split into dozens of tiny bubbles. The movement was unpredictable, organic, mesmerizing. You didn't watch a lava lamp. You zoned out to it. Homework disappeared, conversations faded, time stopped mattering. You'd sit cross-legged on shag carpeting, eyes locked on the slow dance, mind drifting into thoughts about nothing and everything. Music in the 1970s came with commitment. You couldn't skip tracks. You couldn't shuffle. You just listened. And if you wanted portability, music in your car or living room, you needed an 8-track player. The 8-track cartridge was a chunk of plastic about the size of a sandwich, heavy and solid. Inside was a continuous loop of magnetic tape that fed through the cartridge forever, or until it jammed. Loading an 8-track was satisfying. You'd grip the cartridge, line it up, and shove it in with authority. It would click into place, and suddenly your stereo was alive with sound. The Beatles, the Bee Gees, Led Zeppelin. Interior design in the 1970s had one rule. If it could hang from the ceiling, it should. Enter macrame plant hangers, hand-knotted rope contraptions that turned every living room into an indoor jungle. These were craft projects, evidence that your mom had time, patience, and a subscription to a women's magazine with patterns. She'd sit at the kitchen table with spools of jute or cotton cord, following instructions that made knot-tying look like ancient wizardry. The final product would hang from a ceiling hook, drilled directly into plaster. No anchors, just faith. A spider plant or pothos would nestle in a clay pot, suspended in midair by layers of knotted rope. Colors were earth-toned, tan, beige, rust orange, mustard yellow. The rope itself was thick, textured, rough to the touch. Running your fingers along the knots felt therapeutic. Macrame wasn't just for plants, it was everywhere. Wall hangings, curtain tiebacks, purse straps. Room dividers made entirely of knotted rope. The 70s didn't just embrace macrame, it surrendered to it. Making a plant hanger took hours. You'd measure out lengths of cord and start knotting, square knots, half hitches, spiral patterns. One mistake, and the whole thing hung crooked. Your plant would tilt, dripping water onto the shag carpet every time you watered it. Plants in macrame hangers required strategy. Too much water, and it would drip for hours. Too little, and the plant would wilt. You'd stand on a chair to water them, tilting carefully, praying you didn't overfill. The hooks supporting these hangers held more weight than they should have. Occasionally, they'd fail. You'd hear a crash in the middle of the night and find dirt scattered across the floor. Visitors always commented, "Did you make that?" they'd ask, and your mom would nod modestly. By the 1980s, macrame died as fast as it arrived. Suddenly, hanging plants were out. Minimalism was in. But macrame is back now, rebranded as boho chic and sold at Urban Outfitters for $40 apiece. The knots are the same. Only the price has changed. Only the 1970s could turn a literal rock into a $1 million phenomenon. The pet rock wasn't a toy. It wasn't technology. It was a smooth stone in a cardboard box with air holes, sold with a straight face and brilliant marketing. The box looked like a pet carrier. The rock sat on a bed of straw. An instruction manual explained how to care for your rock. No feeding required, no walks necessary, fully house-trained. The whole thing was a joke, and that was the point. Gary Dahl invented the pet rock in a bar while listening to friends complain about their pets. Dogs needed walking, cats needed litter boxes, fish died. What if there was a pet that required nothing? He created one, a rock, smooth, palm-sized, ordinary, but packaged with humor and sold with confidence. At $3.95 each, about $22 today, pet rocks flew off shelves. Christmas 1975, they were everywhere. Kids loved them because they were absurd. You could decorate them with googly eyes, paint faces, give them names. They sat on desks, windowsills, bookshelves. Silent companions that never complained. Adults loved them because they were in on the joke. Owning a pet rock meant you had a sense of humor. It meant you understood satire. The instruction manual was the real genius. It taught you how to make your rock sit, place it on a surface, stay, walk away, and play dead it already was. People read it cover to cover, laughing at instructions for teaching tricks to an inanimate object. The fad lasted 6 months. By mid-1976, pet rocks were over. The joke had been told, the punchline delivered, and America moved on. Gary Dahl made over $1 million. But here's the legacy. Pet rocks proved that in the 1970s, anything could become a phenomenon. You didn't need technology or innovation. You needed timing, humor, and the willingness to sell something ridiculous. The 1970s handed children 2 heavy acrylic balls on a string and said, "Have fun." Clackers, also called click-clacks, were toys designed by someone who clearly never met a personal injury lawyer. The concept was simple. Hold the center ring, swing the balls up and down, get them to collide above and below your hand in rapid succession. The sound they made, clack, 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 was hypnotic, rhythmic, and loud enough to be heard 3 houses away. Kids became obsessed. Schoolyards filled with the sound of 100 clackers going at once, a percussive symphony of acrylic on acrylic. Mastering the rhythm took practice. Too slow, and they'd barely touch. Too fast, and they'd swing wildly, smacking your wrist, your arm, occasionally your face. Injuries were inevitable. The balls were hard, solid acrylic that hit like a hammer. Bruised wrists became badges of honor. Black eyes were explained away as clacker accidents. The real danger came when the acrylic shattered. Cheap clackers would crack under repeated impact, sending shards of plastic flying. Suddenly, a toy became shrapnel. Kids would keep playing with cracked clackers until they exploded mid-swing, which was both terrifying and kind of awesome. Schools banned them. Principals sent letters home warning parents. The FDA investigated. But for a glorious year or two, they were everywhere. The colors were the best part. Clear acrylic with glitter inside. Solid neon colors. Swirled patterns that looked like marbles. Some even had air bubbles trapped inside. You'd hold them up to the light, admire the craftsmanship, then immediately start swinging them at dangerous speeds. Trading clackers was currency. The cooler the design, the higher the value. A set with holographic glitter could buy you 3 lunches worth of chocolate milk. By 1976, clackers had mostly disappeared. Too many injuries, too many lawsuits, but for kids who played with them, the memory is vivid. The weight of the balls, the sting when they hit your wrist, the satisfying clack when you got the rhythm right. Sleeping in the 1970s could mean surrendering to the ocean. Waterbeds weren't just furniture, they were experiences. Part bed, part novelty ride, part science experiment that sometimes flooded your bedroom at 2 a.m. The concept made sense in theory. Replace springs and foam with water. Create a sleeping surface that conformed perfectly to your body. Eliminate pressure points. In practice, waterbeds were chaos wrapped in vinyl. First, you had to fill them. That meant connecting a garden hose to your bathroom faucet and spending 4 hours watching your mattress slowly inflate like a beached whale. The instructions said to add water treatment chemicals to prevent algae growth. Inside your bed, you were sleeping on a treated pond. Once filled, a queen-size waterbed weighed around 1,500 pounds. 1,500 pounds of sloshing liquid supported by a wooden frame and sheer optimism. Lying down felt like drowning in slow motion. The bed would ripple under your weight, waves spreading outward, the entire surface moving in response to every shift. Roll over, and the motion continued for 30 seconds. Your partner moved, and you felt it 5 seconds later. Temperature control was the waterbed's secret weapon and biggest weakness. Heaters installed underneath kept the water warm. In winter, climbing into a heated waterbed felt like luxury. In summer, it turned your bed into a sweaty nightmare. Making a waterbed was Olympic-level difficulty. Fitted sheets didn't fit. Corners popped loose constantly. The mattress had no structure to tuck sheets under. Punctures were catastrophic. A small tear meant slow leakage. A large tear meant flooding, gallons of water spreading across floors, soaking carpets, dripping into rooms below. The sounds were unforgettable. Lying still, you'd hear sloshing from inside. Your partner moved, and the water gurgled. By the 1990s, waterbeds fell out of favor. Too heavy, too impractical, too weird. 10 gadgets down, 20 to go. And if you're noticing a pattern, you're right. Every single one disappeared because we stopped valuing imperfection. We traded quirks for convenience. But here's the thing. These gadgets weren't failures. They were prototypes of our future. The next 10 are even more obscure, gadgets even your parents might have forgotten. Before virtual reality, before 3D movies, there was the Viewmaster. You'd hold a chunky red binocular device up to your eyes, slot in a cardboard reel, and click. Suddenly, you weren't sitting on your shag carpet. You were on a Disney jungle cruise or exploring outer space. The images were crisp, glowing, and weirdly 3D. That tiny plastic wheel with the thumb switch felt like holding a time machine. Reels came in packs, cartoons, nature, landmarks, fairy tales. Some were exciting, others educational, but all had one thing in common: magic. You never viewed just one. It was a whole stack, clicking from one dimension to the next like flipping TV channels with your fingers. And when one reel was done, you flipped it over and started again until the light changed, or your sibling demanded a turn. The Viewmaster wasn't just a toy, it was an escape. Before the internet could show you anything in seconds, the Viewmaster required patience. You had to physically change reels. You had to hold it steady. You had to focus. Every doctor's waiting room had one. Every kid's birthday party featured one. Every Christmas brought new reels, maybe Star Wars, maybe national parks, maybe biblical stories if your grandma did the shopping. The click of advancing to the next image became muscle memory. Click, new scene. Click, new adventure. Click, new world. By the 1990s, VHS tapes and later the Internet made Viewmasters obsolete. Why look at 14 static images when you could watch unlimited video? But here's what Viewmasters had that modern tech doesn't: intention. You chose what to see. You held it in your hands. You controlled the experience. That chunky red device wasn't streaming content at you. It was showing you carefully curated moments, one click at a time. And sometimes, that's all you needed. If your dad was serious about sound, you had a reel-to-reel tape recorder. This thing looked like it belonged at NASA or in a spy movie. 2 spinning wheels, miles of brown tape, glowing buttons, and that mesmerizing hum. It was less music player and more sacred ritual. You weren't allowed near it. Maybe you could stand close and watch as the reels spun hypnotically. Dad would carefully thread the tape, a delicate process that involved feeding the tape from one reel through various posts and guides to the take-up reel. One wrong move, and you'd have to start over. Then he'd push a few buttons and sit back like a pilot initiating takeoff. The sound was crisp, clean, real, like the band was in the room. The reels would slowly unwind, spilling song after song as the machine clicked and whirred. If it jammed, there'd be panic. If the tape snapped, it was like someone slashed a painting. You didn't fix it easily. Sometimes you mourned it, but when it worked, it was music in its purest form, warm, full, alive. The kind of sound that made you stop talking and just listen. Reel-to-reel recorders weren't for casual listeners. They were for audiophiles, for people who cared about fidelity and warmth and the ritual of playing music. You couldn't just press play. You had to prepare. You had to understand the machine. You had to respect it. Breakfast in the 1970s could taste like the future, and that future was orange, powdery, and endorsed by astronauts. Tang wasn't just a drink. It was liquid space exploration you could pour into a glass. NASA used Tang on Gemini and Apollo missions, and that was all the marketing they needed. If astronauts drank it in space, it had to be good. Never mind that it was mostly sugar and artificial flavoring. It came from space. The powder came in a large jar, bright orange crystals that looked radioactive and kind of were, at least in color. You'd scoop 2 or 3 spoonfuls into a glass, add cold water, and stir, and stir, and stir, because Tang never fully dissolved. There were always little clumps floating at the top, settling at the bottom, refusing to integrate. The taste was unique. Not quite orange juice, not quite lemonade, somewhere in between, with a chalky texture and an aftertaste that lingered, but we drank it anyway because astronauts drank it, and that made us cool. Some families made Tang in pitchers, pre-mixed and stored in the refrigerator. Others made it by the glass, adjusting the powder-to-water ratio like amateur chemists. Too much powder, and it was undrinkably sweet. Too little, and you were basically drinking slightly orange water. The 1970s promised a lot of things, and one of them was that jewelry could read your emotions. Mood rings, chunky metal bands with a color-changing stone, claimed to reveal your inner feelings through thermochromic magic. The stone would shift colors based on your body temperature. Blue meant calm, green meant balanced, yellow meant anxious, black meant stressed, or possibly dead. At least, that's what the chart said. In reality, mood rings mostly responded to ambient temperature and how tightly you wore them. Sit outside in winter, and your mood ring would turn black and tell you that you were dead inside, which, to be fair, was accurate when it was 20 degrees outside. But none of that mattered, because mood rings looked cool. They came in silver or gold-tone bands, oversized designs that made your hand feel heavy and important. The stone was large, oval, mysterious. You'd stare at it during boring classes, watching colors shift, convinced it was revealing deep psychological truths. They still don't work, they still look cool, and they still convince people that a $10 piece of jewelry can reveal emotional truth. If you ever stood up and felt your skin peel away from the furniture, congratulations. You survived the plastic couch cover era. These vinyl shields were meant to protect your grandma's good couch from wear and tear. What they actually did was turn your living room into a sweaty greenhouse. They squeaked when you shifted. They crinkled when you sat. And in the summer, forget it. One wrong move and you were branded like cattle. Your bare legs would stick to the plastic, creating a seal that could only be broken with pain and determination, but they stayed because those couches were sacred, floral, tufted, and often untouched by bare human skin, thanks to these shiny, heat-trapping barriers. The logic was simple: keep the couch perfect for company. Never mind that company also had to sit on the plastic. Never mind that the couch underneath was pristine but unused, preserved for a special occasion that never came. The couch underneath stayed perfect for decades. The memories of suffering on plastic stayed forever. Protect the couch at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing comfort, dignity, and the back of your thighs. The electric football game looked like the coolest toy ever until you turned it on. A metal field, plastic players, and a little motor that made the whole thing vibrate like it was having a nervous breakdown. You'd spend 20 minutes setting up the perfect play. Offensive line, quarterback, wide receivers, then flip the switch. The players buzzed across the field, spinning, bumping, and mostly going nowhere. But once in a while, one would actually head in the right direction, and the whole room would erupt. There was a learning curve. You had to bend the little metal tabs under each player to steer them. But it never worked the same way twice. Your quarterback would spin in circles. Your running back would vibrate off the field entirely. Your defense would ignore the ball carrier and head for the sidelines. The field itself was painted metal, usually in team colors, with yard lines and end zones. The motor underneath hummed loudly, creating vibrations that sent players skittering randomly across the surface like confused ants. In the 70s, all you needed for a summer makeover was a bottle of Sun In. This lemony spray promised golden highlights with nothing but sunlight and a dream. You'd spritz it generously before heading outside, hoping to come back looking like a surfer. And sometimes you did. But more often, your hair turned a shade of orange not found in nature. Didn't matter. It smelled great and felt rebellious, like controlling your own destiny, one mist at a time. Sun In wasn't just for girls. Plenty of boys tried it too, hoping for that beachy look without the beach. And it usually came with a side of crunchy hair, dried out by peroxide and ambition. The bottle was small, plastic, with a spray nozzle that sometimes worked and sometimes shot liquid directly into your eyes. The instructions were simple. Spray generously, comb through, go outside. The sun's UV rays would activate the hydrogen peroxide, lightening your hair naturally. By September, when school started, you'd assess the damage. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was educational. But for one summer, you had highlights, and that was worth the orange. 20 gadgets down, 10 left. And we're getting into truly obscure territory now. Gadgets that even hardcore 70s enthusiasts might not remember. These are the products that were regional, the ones that only appeared in specific catalogs, the ones that required patience you can barely find today. Let's finish strong. Before memes and parodies went viral online, they lived on your lunchbox in the form of wacky packages. These sticker cards took everyday products and twisted them into hilarious, gross-out versions that made every kid laugh and every teacher sigh. Cap'n Crud, Lavorice soap, jail mail cigarettes. They were bold, colorful, and completely inappropriate, which made them even better. You'd buy them in packs like trading cards, sniff the gum, and maybe chew it if it wasn't petrified, then carefully peel and stick them onto your school books, lockers, and trapper keepers. Some schools banned them, some parents disapproved, but we loved them. They weren't just funny, they were subversive. Little jabs at consumer culture that made us feel clever and just a bit rebellious. The artwork was incredible. Professional illustrators created these parodies, making them look almost identical to real products, except for the twisted names and disgusting imagery. The attention to detail was absurd for what was essentially a joke sticker. If you had the whole collection, you were basically comedy royalty on the playground. Kids would trade them like currency. A rare sticker could get you 3 common ones. A pristine, unstuck sticker was worth even more. The gum that came with them was terrible. Hard, flavorless, and sometimes covered in stickerback residue. But you'd chew it anyway because that was part of the ritual. Some toys you played with carefully. Stretch Armstrong was not one of them. This gel-filled action figure could stretch from 15 inches to nearly 5 feet, and every kid wanted to find out what would happen if they pulled hard enough. Spoiler, eventually he'd tear. And when he did, corn syrup gel would ooze out like alien blood, sticky and impossible to clean up. But until that moment, Stretch Armstrong was indestructible entertainment. The figure itself was muscular, blonde, wearing nothing but tiny red swim trunks. His skin was latex, his insides were goo, and his purpose was to be stretched, twisted, tied in knots, and subjected to every form of torture a child's imagination could invent. You'd pull his arms as far as they'd go, watching them thin out like rubber bands. You'd tie his limbs in knots. You'd see if he could wrap around furniture. And then you'd let go and watch him slowly return to normal shape. Friends would compete to see who could stretch him farther. I got him to 4 feet. Yeah, well, I got him to 5. It was nonsense measurement, but it felt real. The worst thing that could happen was a small tear. Once punctured, Stretch Armstrong became a leaking disaster. Stretch Armstrong taught an important lesson. Everything has limits. Even toys designed to be stretched will eventually break. Before tablets, Before digital art, there was Light Bright, a glowing pegboard where you'd push colorful plastic pegs into black paper to create illuminated artwork. The concept was simple but magical. The box contained a light bulb, a black screen, and hundreds of translucent pegs in different colors. You'd choose a design template, a clown, a sailboat, a Christmas tree, slide it into the frame, and start pushing pegs through the printed dots. As each peg went in, light would shine through it, creating a glowing pixel of color. Slowly, your picture would emerge from darkness. Red here, blue there, yellow for the sun, green for grass. Each peg clicked satisfyingly into place, and each addition made the image brighter. The light bulb inside got hot. Touch the screen after 20 minutes of light bright time, and you'd pull your hand back fast. But that heat was part of the magic. It made the colors glow intensely, turning simple plastic into something that looked professional. Some kids followed the templates, others freestyled, creating abstract designs or writing words in glowing letters. The real artists mixed colors, layered pegs, and created scenes that had nothing to do with the included patterns. But here's what everyone remembers: the sound. Pushing a peg through paper made a satisfying pop. Times that by 200 pegs, and you had a symphony of plastic clicks that meant you were creating something. Running out of one color was devastating. You'd substitute, using orange when you needed red, green when you wanted blue. Your clown's nose would be purple because you ran out of red halfway through. And at the end, you'd turn off the room lights, admire your glowing creation, and feel like an actual artist. Light Bright wasn't just a toy. It was proof that light and color and patience could create something beautiful, even if it was just a clown. Speak and Spell was the first time many kids interacted with a computer that talked back. This chunky orange device from Texas Instruments turned spelling practice into a game with a robotic voice that sounded like it was transmitted from another dimension. The interface was simple: a small screen, a full keyboard, and several buttons for different modes. You'd turn it on, and a synthesized voice would say, "Spell music." Then you'd type your answer on the keyboard, get it right, and the robot voice would celebrate, "That is correct. Get it wrong. That is incorrect. The correct spelling is music." The voice was simultaneously creepy and fascinating. It was clearly not human, too mechanical, too choppy, too robotic. But it was also intelligent in a way that felt futuristic. This machine knew words. It could judge your spelling. It talked to you. Speak and Spell had multiple modes: Spell It, Say It, Code Breaker, Letter Perfect. Each one tested different skills, all with that same robotic voice narrating your successes and failures. Kids would deliberately spell words wrong just to hear the robot correct them. You'd type nonsense and wait for the machine's response. Sometimes you'd just press random buttons to see what would happen. The device ran on batteries and could be taken anywhere: car trips, waiting rooms, grandma's house. Parents loved it because it was educational. Kids tolerated it because the robot voice made it feel like a game instead of homework. Before video game crashes, there were toy crashes, and no toy crashed better than the Evel Knievel stunt cycle. This wind-up motorcycle and action figure set let you recreate the death-defying stunts of America's favorite daredevil. The toy was simple: a plastic motorcycle, an Evel Knievel figure, and a wind-up energizer that could launch both at terrifying speeds. You'd place the bike in the energizer, crank the handle 20, 30, 40 times until the gyroscope inside was spinning at maximum velocity. Then press the release button and watch Evel fly. The bike would shoot across the floor at impressive speeds, jumping over ramp, crashing into walls, launching off makeshift jumps made from books and couch cushions. Sometimes Evel stayed on the bike. More often, he'd fly off mid-jump, tumbling through the air like a plastic test dummy. And that was the point. The crashes were the best part. Kids would build elaborate courses: ramps made from cardboard, jumps made from shoeboxes, obstacles made from toy cars and action figures. Then they'd wind up Evel, send him flying, and watch physics take over. The gyroscope technology was impressive. As long as the bike was moving, it stayed upright, balancing on two wheels like magic. Only when it slowed down or hit an obstacle would it tip over, sending evil flying. The toy encouraged experimentation. How far could evil jump? How many toy buses could he clear? What happened if you wound it up 100 times instead of 40? Answer, it broke. Evel Knievel, the real person, was famous for breaking bones. Evel Knievel, the toy, was famous for breaking everything else. Furniture, windows, younger siblings' toys. It was chaos. It was dangerous. It was exactly what 1970s toys were supposed to be. Weaned it up, let it go, and watch what breaks. Before reward points and online cash back, there were S&H green stamps. You earned them with groceries, gas, and patience. Cashiers would hand you a stack with every purchase. Then you'd go home and stick them into stamp books, with care usually reserved for fine art. Page after page, you filled those books with dreams, toasters, blenders, maybe a lawn chair if you saved enough. It wasn't instant gratification. It was a long game. Kids would help lick and stick, sitting around the kitchen table, counting how many more you needed. Eventually, you'd walk into an S&H redemption center, clutching your stamp-filled bounty, and walk out with a brand-new popcorn popper and a grin that lasted all week. Some candies melt, others crunch, but only one exploded inside your mouth. Pop Rocks were less snack and more science experiment gone deliciously right. Tear open the packet, pour the pebbles into your mouth, and instantly they'd start fizzing, snapping, and cracking like fireworks against your tongue. It felt like eating lightning. Some kids swore if you mixed Pop Rocks with soda, you'd explode. The urban legend was so widespread that the company had to run ads debunking it. Teachers hated them because kids would sneak them in class, and the crackling was audible from 3 rows away. Pop Rocks weren't just candy. They were conversation starters, playground currency, and proof that food could be entertainment. Before megaplexes and reclining seats, movie night meant piling into the car and heading to the drive-in theater. You didn't just go to see a film. You went to experience it from the back seat of a Buick with a speaker hooked to your window. You'd pack snacks, blankets, and bug spray. The screen loomed large against the night sky. In the 1970s, knowledge didn't come from Google. It came from a door-to-door encyclopedia salesman in a brown suit holding the entire universe in 2 sample volumes. These guys had pitches. They'd sit at your kitchen table and unfold the dream. Your child, smarter, more successful, more worldly, all thanks to 26 leather-bound volumes of information. Eventually, the deal was made, and a few weeks later, giant boxes arrived with your shiny new Britannica set. Suddenly, your living room bookshelf looked like a library. We mostly used them for the color photos and the transparent human anatomy overlays, those plastic sheets that showed organs, then muscles, then skeleton. That was peak 70s education technology. Art class in the 1970s wasn't complete without scented markers. These brightly colored felt-tip markers didn't just color your paper. They filled the room with sugary synthetic smells, and that one weird brown one that might have been root beer. Kids would hoard their favorites, trade them like currency, and sometimes sniff them so much it gave them a headache. The 1970s gave us imperfect gadgets that became perfect memories. We adapted to them, learned their quirks, accepted their flaws. No updates, no patches, just products that required patience and created legacy. Drop a comment. Which one hit you hardest? Which memory came rushing back? Those memories don't need updates.